So the king calls all these. If you remember, those of you that were here for the first part of Daniel, remember we have Nebuchadnezzar having the dream and calling all the wise men to come. We have that a couple of different times that they call the wise men, and Daniel is the one who's able to interpret what's going on. Well, the king here calls for the enchanters, the astrologers, the diviners to be brought. And he said to the wise men, whoever reads this writing tells me what it means to be clothed in purple, will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain around their neck, will be made the third highest in the kingdom. Why the third highest? His dad's king. He's number 2. So whoever can read the writing would become number 3. And the king's wise men all came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So the king became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. You ever get baffled in life when you can't figure out what's going on? Not quite for sure what direction you're called to take? I know a lot of people ask me that at times. What should we do about this, Pastor? What direction should I go? What path do I need to go down? And you know what my first answer basically is? Are you reading this? And as you're reading this, are you in prayer about what path to go down? We're going to get our answers from this. We're not going to get our answers from what society tells us. It's going to be from this. So the king is baffled. Verse 10. The queen, but it's thought really at this point it's the queen mother. All the reading that I've done on this, they think it's more the queen mother comes in. She hears the voices, and she comes to the banquet hall, and she says, "O king, live forever. Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There's a man in the kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods. In the time of your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, he had insight and intelligence and wisdom like the gods. And your father, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, the enchanters, the astrologers, the diviners. This man Daniel, thank you. Too many cold medication drugs, sorry. This man Daniel, who is also called Belteshazzar, was found to have been of keen mind, knowledge. Call for Daniel, he will tell you what it means." So Daniel was brought before the king. He was brought before the king. And the king offers him everything again. Hey, if you tell me what's going on with the writing on the wall, I'll give you all these things. And we drop down to verse 17. And it says, Daniel answered the king, "You can keep your gifts. You can keep your rewards. Give them to somebody else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing on the wall, and I'll tell you what it means. But first off, I need to tell you about your life. O king, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty, greatness, glory, and splendor because of the high position he gave him. All the peoples and nations and the men of every language dreaded and they feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. Those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was disposed of." And if you've never read the book of Daniel, go home and read it. That disposing, chapter 4, when the king loses his mind and becomes like an animal. He disposed him from the throne. He stripped him of all his glory. Verse 21, he was driven away from the people. He lived like a wild donkey. He ate grass until he acknowledged the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdom of men and sets limits over everyone he wishes. But you, O king, you have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. You have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You have taken the goblets from the temple brought to you and to your nobles and your wives, and you drank from the goblets, says Daniel. Then he says, you praise the gods of silver, gold, the bronze, iron, wood, and stone that can't hear or they cannot be understood. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and your ways. Therefore, he sent the message which wrote the inscription. You have not humbled yourself. Pride gets in the way of our relationship with Jesus, doesn't it? And our relationship with God. I can do it my way. I know the right way to live my life, and I'm going to do it my way. Now, in some respects, there is a sense that pride can be good within our life when we are proud in what Christ has done for us. Okay, you got to follow me with this. When we understand how God's worked within our life. This pride is the pride from Proverbs, where it talks about a haughty spirit and pride God despises. Pride comes before the fall. When that pride is a self-made pride within our lives. When the king says, hey, I am the man. I may be number 2, but look at Babylon. Babylon at that time, through the discoveries of what's going on, it's been found out Babylon had a wall about 60 miles long around it. There's discussions whether the wall was anywhere from 100 to 300 feet high. That's a pretty high wall. I mean, that's bigger than the Great Wall of China in height. The wall was 80 feet wide on top, where 4 chariots could race around on. Babylon had a 20-year supply of food in case there was a siege. I mean, you can get online today and you can buy yourself the bomb bunker. You know, put it in the backyard, bury it. You can buy all the food to survive for the next 20 years. Well, Babylon had that. 20 years of food. They had one of the rivers that flowed right through Babylon. They had the water that they needed. And King Belshazzar, in his heart, says, we got it all. Nobody's going to touch us. There was a pride in his heart. He also set himself up against the Lord God. Arrogance. Arrogance. The reality, the fact that he says, nobody's going to touch us. Nobody's going to harm us. Nobody's going to hurt us. We can outlast another army that shows up because we have 20 years worth of food. And how often maybe don't we do that within our own lives? We look at others with arrogance. We look down our nose at somebody else with what they're going through in their life or their struggle that they're having. We sort of place ourselves up and we look with arrogance at somebody else. We look at God with arrogance, and it sort of gets into the pride again. But we look at God and we say, we know better what's for us than what you know, God. As Daniel said, he took the goblets. He brought from the temple the goblets, and they drank from them. They drank wine from them, blaspheming. I would love to ask the Lord God sometime why He gave Nebuchadnezzar 3 different times in his life to confess who the Lord was. Confess who God was. But Belshazzar, it was sort of a cut and dry. You did it, you're done. I think this might be one of them. When Nebuchadnezzar took the gold items from the temple, he put them in storage. Belshazzar takes them out, and they use them for a common party. A college-age drunken party. Blasphemy. You and I ever do that with God? You know, we are a chosen people, a holy people. If you've accepted Christ into your life, you become set apart. You become China. Set apart, something special. Do we ever take what's special in our lives and who we are, and we just make it so common? Gets into, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Not dealing just simply with swearing, but when we make God's name so common that there's nothing special about it. That it's not holy anymore. When they blasphemed, they took what was special in the worship of God and made it common, and really put it down below commonness of the drunken party. So for our life, what do we do with that which God has given us and has created us to be set apart? Do we use that to glorify God? Or do we blaspheme within our life and we sort of say, no, God, you can't do that in my life. No, God, you can't change that in my life. No, God, you can't.